Hey everybody, it's Dan. Welcome back and welcome to another Games Workshop kind of business analysis video. I swear this is not a new direction for the channel. This is just something that's been on my mind. I just put out a video that was looking at kind of the health of the company, taking a look at their 2025 financial summary, and someone in the comments had specifically requested that we do a side-by-side comparison of their 2015 fiscal year-end results and their 2025 fiscal year-end results. And I thought that was a great idea. It's something I can put out here pretty quickly. And as I just alluded to, though, this is not a new direction for the channel. You're not going to see a whole bunch of these videos start popping up in your feed. This is just, as I said in the last video, kind of something that's been on my mind. And I really don't have any other stuff to review right now. I'm waiting for some things to arrive. So bear with me. If this isn't something that's for you, just skip it. But if this is for you, welcome. What we're going to do here is take a look really quickly at their financial summaries for 2025 and 2015. I just wanted to show off where I'm getting this information from, because what I've done is I've ported all this stuff over into Excel for easier comparison and analysis. But you can look this up for yourself. This is all on the Games Workshop website. They put out year and half year results every year. And so what I have here are the 2015, so fiscal year end 2015, that's June of 2014 through 2015, and then I have June of 2024 through 2025. And as we'll see here in a second, the difference is pretty glaring. They had two different CEOs then, with I think one in between, and so it's a very different company now as it was then. But anyway, so that's where I'm getting all this information from. And here is a screen grab of an Excel file that I threw together, because I'm not actually that technically savvy. So that's what I'm looking at here. It's just a image of an Excel file. But what we'll see here, again, before I start digging down into the numbers, let me at least explain my methodology here. Over on the far right here, under the red column, is the information as it's presented on the financial summary from 2015. And as you might have guessed, inflation plays a really big role here. And in fact, on each of their financial summaries, they have a line that is about revenue at constant currency and profit at constant currency, because of course money in most countries devalues over time. So that is to say that in 2014, if you had a pound in your pocket, you would have more buying power then than you would now. So you have to take that into account, especially when we're talking about comparisons between two different financial statements. And indeed, what I have there, you can see that inflation modifier in the top right is, I use a couple of different calculators to do these kinds of assessments, and that was the average number that I settled on. So that's the modifier of 1.35, which means that if you had a pound in 2014, again, in your pocket, or a dollar in your pocket, but we're talking about British pounds here. If you had a pound in your pocket, you would need a pound 35 today in order to have the same buying power then. So that's our modifier that we're using. So the raw numbers there on the under the column that's red is as it's stated on the financial summary from 2015. And if I scroll back to the left here, you can see there, adjusted for inflation numbers, it's the same numbers but multiplied by that modifier. So this is suggesting that if you took Games Workshop from 2015 and somehow magically teleported them to 2025, and the company performed the exact same way, those are the numbers that they would have raked in for this fiscal year 2024 through 2025. So that's the comparison that we're doing here. Let's go through some of these key indicators here to see how the company's evolved. So let's start with 2014. So core revenue, we mentioned in the last video, is the sale of all of their merchandise. So any like tactical marine boxes, paints, books, you name it. If Games Workshop sells it, that's their core revenue, what they call core revenue. That's 161 million pounds is what they made effectively in the 2014 to 2015 fiscal year. You can see this past year, 2024 to 2025, that jumped to 565 million pounds. So massive, massive growth over that 10-year period of time. Again, this is an apples to apples comparison, because this is taking inflation into account. I can't stress that enough. Licensing revenue is an interesting one too, because that is royalty deals, right? So I've mentioned Total War, those like 40K mobile games. I assume like Funko Pops and stuff like that. Anytime they license out their IP, that's going to be showing up here as licensing revenue. Now, you'll note that in 2014, 2015, they didn't list it as revenue. It was just a line item under profits. And you can see that a couple of rows down where it says licensing profit, because they treated it just as pure profit back then. Whereas now it's actually like its own separate business unit, essentially, with its own separate profit. That's why they list it out as revenue and profit now. If you ask me, I think it should have said like licensing revenue 2 million and licensing profit 2 million, which is 100% profit, but whatever, I didn't put together the financial summary. So you can see a huge jump in licensing revenue between 2015 and 2025, which is interesting because like their IP hasn't changed, right? Other than the introduction of Age of Sigmar, which I don't see licensed out very often, certainly not compared to 40K. What this speaks to is a change in strategy, right? That over the last 10 years, they've massively ramped up the amount that they are pushing to have their IP used in places other than the games and the game systems that they sell. So that's why we see a huge jump in not only licensing revenue, like an infinite jump in licensing revenue, but a huge jump in profits. We're going to take a look at the differences and kind of the percent increases here in just a second. But that's where things sit in terms of the differences in revenue. So you see the huge jump in revenue, you see a huge jump in profit. Margin is another thing to pay attention to. Again, that's tied to your profits and overhead, as we were just talking about. But you can see a 13% profit margin, which is just dividing your total profit into your total revenue. 13% then, 37% now, which suggests, again, this is all taking averages into account, but that if they sell $100 worth of a starter set, for example, the Games Workshop at the end of the day, after they pay everybody, is pocketing 37%. They're going to pocket $37 if they sell you $100 worth of goods. Whereas 10 years ago, sell that same $100 worth of goods, they were pocketing $13 at the end of the day after they pay everything. So really, really strong increases both in revenue and profitability over this 10-year period of time. And again, some strategic changes in terms of licensing, how they're making a lot of these profits. But again, like it's not just profit coming from licensing. I really want to stress that it's not just that, they're tanking their core business and now, just licensing out their IP. You can see massive growth in their core business as well in this period of time. And if I scroll to the right a little bit here, you can see what those differences are. So again, we're talking, that's going from top to bottom here. They've had a £404 million increase in revenues, so 251% increase. You can read those numbers there as well. Infinite increase, of course, in licensing revenue. Total revenue, massive increases as well. But look at the percent increases in profits, right? So you've got your core business is up 1,000% in profits in that 10-year period of time. 2,000% increase in licensing profits. Again, big strategy shift from them there. And we see now that they actually have a licensing arm, since there's overhead to it, about £3 million they're suggesting in overhead for licensing. And then a net 1,000% increase in total overall profits, which is just like mind-blowing. I can't stress enough how other industries would be salivating at numbers like that. Now, everything is up across the board at the business. They're doing remarkably well over this 10-year period of time. Let's take a look at share information down there at the bottom, because they do publish dividends per share. You can see that number listed there, and that 70p number, which is, if you have no idea what that means, companies sometimes pay dividends out to shareholders of just as a way of like paying forward some of the profits that the company is making. And so if you have 1,000 shares of Games Workshop, right, and it's paying out 70p per share, you can do the math on how much money you would make as a shareholder of the company. And that's in addition to like if you were to buy and sell shares, netting the difference on those gains. That's how people make money in the stock market. But dividends is another way that companies, again, try to make their stock more appetizing to shareholders. I mean, you can see that they pretty regularly pay out dividends. I think there were a couple of years there where they did not. If you're a shareholder, you can let me know. But at least from what I've seen, I think they generally pay out some kind of dividend. And you can see the huge bump. Again, 70p is the inflation adjusted number. I think it was 52p that they actually paid out in 2015 per share. And then they're up to 520p in 2025. So huge boost in terms of dividends per share. But also look at the share price. This is something that I pulled offline. I couldn't find it in British pounds. I don't know why. I assume just because I'm region locked that it's showing everything to me in USD. But the point still stands, which you can figure out for yourself. Again, the percent increase is what we're really talking about here. that a single share of Games Workshop stock was $11.49 in 2015. And today it's $224 for the exact same share. So I've done the math for you there. You can see that if you bought 500 shares of Games Workshop stock in 2015, it would have cost you $5,745 US. Again, this is all inflation adjusted. 500 shares today is worth $112,000. So if you bought those 500 shares, forget about the dividends that you would have been paid out for every year or almost every year between 2015 and now. If you bought 500 shares of Games Workshop stock for $57.45 back in 2015 and sat on it for 10 years, you would have, again, if you went and sold it today, again, there's nuance to that as well, but if you sold it today, you would pocket $106,000 in profit. So what's the final thoughts here? So at the end of the day, Games Workshop over the last 10 years has improved every single metric that an investor would want to pay attention to in making a decision about whether or not to invest in the company. Now, do I have personal reservations about the direction that they're going? I mentioned things like, again, the pacing of price increases that far outpaces inflation. The business decisions on things like withholding stock from FLGSs that I mentioned in order to sell it direct to consumers online for a higher profit margin, or bundling in some of your new products with old stock in order to kind of force the sale of that stuff. Do I think that that is, in the long term, and by long term I'm talking about like 5 to 10 years from now, is that detrimental to the community? Yes, I think it is. I think that this is great for shareholders. This is great for the company year to year. And we see that. There's no denying that the company's doing well. So if you're like crossing your fingers, maybe Schadenfreude-esque, waiting for Games Workshop to fail, that's not spelled out in the numbers at all. And it's not going to happen rapidly, right? What I think we'll eventually see is a plateau in these increases. And then you might start to see some decline. And that is because of the nature of our community, right? That unlike the sale of a collectible good like a luxury watch, for example, the sale of these miniatures is tied directly to a community. There's a social aspect to this game, and so successes build on themselves. But I fear, again, I can't deduce this from the numbers, but anecdotally, my fear is that they're selling more product, making more profit, selling more product to either a stagnating or slightly shrinking base of consumers, and that is, again, bad in the long term for the company, since it is so predicated on a game being played, a social aspect, a community that is thriving. So there's a balance to be struck here. Again, the financial summary can only tell you so much about the health of a company, but again, in terms of the metrics that an investor would care about, everything looks great. And as I said that, in my last video, that if I'm in the executive suite at Games Workshop looking at these numbers, there's nothing in here that indicates that I need to change the direction of the company. Everything suggests that we got to keep doing what we're doing. Now, if you care about this personally, I don't buy Games Workshop products, so this does not really affect me. But if you do, and you're worried about them continuing to increase prices, they're going to, because that is how businesses operate, and that's especially ones that are publicly traded are obligated to, for their investors, to keep continuing on this trend. So if nothing in the numbers suggests that there's a problem, they're not going to make any changes. They're going to keep doubling down, again, because they have an obligation to their investors to do that. So as I said, this is not going to be a new direction for the channel. I really don't have much more to say on this subject anyway, but I thought this would be a fun little comparison to do. I do have some more hobby content and review content coming soon, so bear with me. If this is not for you, but you watched it anyway, I really do appreciate your patience. Appreciate your time. Appreciate you dropping by for this one. In the meantime, happy gaming.